Hi. So first of all, thank you for putting up with me when Fernanda asked me to do this. In full disclosure, I work with Fernanda at several creative agencies. I said, you really want a tobacco person? So I am going to share with you 20 minutes of the rest of my life and of trends, and then I'll dig into what we're trying to do. And I understand if it offends, just don't throw tomatoes. I've been through a really long week. So look, it's a total honor to be here, to be in front of so many of you that are so creative. The work we've just seen is the kind of work that I would have been really proud to have been the planner on. I've had a long and varied career in advertising, and then more recently for the last 12 years in PR. And I've had the challenge of learning from some of the creative forces in that industry. I had the luxury of working directly for Jay Chiat, for Bob Cooperman, and working alongside a giant like Lee Clow. Before joining Philip Morris in 2018, I was the CEO of Havas PR, and I chaired its global agencies around the world. I've also been the CMO at J. Walter Thompson, or JWT as we called it then. Today, I'm hoping to share with you some of the things I've learned from the campaigns I've been involved with to show how we as creatives can empower others. I also want to show you people that are really inspiring me. It has nothing to do with anything I work on. And yet what I crave is what's in the news that's going to make me believe we can do better and be better. There's no force on earth more powerful than well-harnessed creativity. I don't know how many of you remember that in fall of 1997, when my then agency launched the Think Different campaign, Apple had less than 5% market share in most of the world. People thought it was a company in its final state of decline. When I sat in the management meeting, I was quite junior, but I sat in the management meeting when we decided that we were going back to Apple. A lot of people were very upset we were going to walk away from this brand new client we thought we were going to win called Gateway 2000. We thought Apple was dead and Gateway was the future. Remember, October or summer 1997. We've come a really long way. And creativity has had so much to do on every level, from product to packaging to messaging to activations to executions. There are no limits to what we can do with things, and creativity also serves as an outlet for passion, an object of love, and a mechanism for change. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the change campaigns. Look, as it was said in the introduction, I am known as a trend spotter. I'm not a visual artist. I worked on hundreds of advertising campaigns, but I'm not even a writer, although I've written or co-authored 16 books. My creative superpower is in trend spotting. It's in figuring out what's going to happen over the next 24 months and how I can glom a brand onto that to own the dialogue. It's about looking at what's going to take shape and figuring out how we can be part of the conversation, how we can steer the conversation, but never own the conversation, because as that last spot from Magnum showed us, if you lose your authenticity, you've lost your soul. I'm spending my time looking always for patterns. So if you go with me to a grocery store, it's a deeply humiliating experience. I spend half the time filling my cart and the other half the time asking people why they've put things in their carts. It's even harder to believe when you learn that I'm actually naturally very shy, but I'm actually very nosy. So while I'm shy and would prefer not have to speak to others, I'm really curious about what they're doing. I also spend my life watching reality television. And now that I'm living in a country, I am so familiar with British reality TV that it's very sad. I watch Four in a Bed. I watch First Dates. I watch The Real Housewives of Cheshire. I mean, you name it, and I have now an addiction to it. Not because reality TV is reality, but you start to see the patterns again and again. So look, I'm endlessly serious about all this, but my career was really set with a tragic sighting. I'm going to let you, and this is the worst piece of film I've ever shown to a non-creative audience. I'm really embarrassed, but please bear with that. It's old.
Why are more and more men getting manicures, pedicures, and facials? A new trend. Men into their appearance.
Tom, I'm standing in South Park, Colorado, where the first annual Metrosexual Pride Parade is underway.
Next time you walk by a manicurist or some posh upscale spa, don't be surprised if it's not just women you see getting the latest beauty treatment. As Les Front reports, men are now getting in touch with their feminine side.
Nail polish. And boy crush blush, also known as light pink. I'd say your killer's a female.
Or metrosexual.
There's a new group of pleasure-seeking people, apparently. They're straight men or metrosexuals willing to get in touch with their feminine side. That's why we asked Al to be our pampered pooch this morning.
There's a new breed of men on the prowl tonight. They're called metrosexuals.
Look, you guys are carrying this fad too far. Will you please stop acting this way?
You don't like us being metrosexual?
No!
I mean, let's face it, this is a really tough act for me to follow. In 2003, I brought that word to the public, not for my own purposes, but to give Peroni beer a place to live with men who wanted to be just gay enough. It was an extraordinarily provocative idea. I did not invent the word. The word was sitting on my wall in the office at Havas. It had been faxed to me, because back in those days we still used the fax machine. It had been faxed to me by another strategist who wanted to describe an incredibly annoying human we worked with. And he said, "Stop worrying about him, I've discovered what he is." The word had been used 7 times from 1992 to 2003, and yet we created Metrosexual Mania. We did it with such an incredible strategic toolbox of saying no in the beginning. Launched it on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. There was this very ridiculous photo of me saying, "This woman wonders whether men have a future." We followed 2 weeks later by a live focus group with the New York Times, where we explored with men how they felt about the label. The New York Times comes out the night before electronically and at newspaper stands in New York, and by, I'd say, 12:15 in the morning, and this is before there really was social media, but there were people posting comments. It had already risen to be the #1 read article. And on Craigslist, there were already women posting they wanted metrosexual boyfriends. There were mothers sending me emails to my corporate email box asking if I could fix their daughter up with a metrosexual man. And there were metrosexual men who asked if there was some way to certify them so that people wouldn't think they were bisexual. I mean, you would not believe the amount of energy. And then it was a matter of finding enough men on our team to have every body part waxed, with TV crews from anywhere from Russia to Argentina to India to Australia. And wherever I traveled for at least the next decade, I was never called Marian. It'd be like, "That's that metrosexual lady." I could talk to you for 1,000 reasons how we identified it, but it was really 3 statistical data points. And a lot of the greatest creativity comes out of reversing the data. I had discovered from a study we had done in fall of 2002 that about 30%, between 30 and 35% of men felt they no longer were sure they could be the CEO of the bedroom or the boardroom, but they knew that the kitchen was available in their homes. That was item #1. A second item we discovered was there was a real jealousy about the kinds of fun women were having going with their gay male friends to gay bars. Men felt left out, about 20-odd%. And we asked men if they wanted to be known as the best friend, the best lover, or the best shopping partner for the women in their lives. In a lot of the feedback and in the qualitative comments, they realized they would get the furthest fastest by being better at shopping. And we put that together, we buried it underneath this word, and the rest really is history. For me, a really sad history, because if I don't do something a whole lot smarter, and I am getting really much older, I will have, she popularized metrosexual on my tombstone. And that's a really bad way to die. So you shouldn't die on your knees, but you also shouldn't die with metrosexual on your tombstone. Let me skip to him. Okay, let me talk about the next one. I gravitate towards work that makes a difference. So one project that came to me through a correspondent agency we knew in DC was the situation in Haiti right after the earthquake. They asked me to go and meet in a diner in New Jersey, and many agency CEOs would have been, no way. I was like, this sounds like a really awesome adventure, to go and meet Wyclef Jean. The former Fuji has stepped forward as the guy that was going to help Haiti to recover. He ended up kind of reaching an agreement, and how we reached the agreement, he said to me, do you want to come with me in 2 more nights to Carnegie Hall and see me perform with Yo-Yo Ma? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dr. Ruth Westheimer, but he had her and he had me as his two guests in his viewing box. And at that point, I had become captivated by this guy that I was sort of familiar with his work with the Fugees, but didn't really know. So then Wyclef went on to host a telethon that raised more than $60 million in aid. You probably remember the song, "The We Are the World." And he started getting more and more media attention. The concert became a movement, and Wyclef became something of a national hero in Haiti. And we became good friends. I began to think of him as my really deviant little brother, like any trouble he could possibly get into that was just bad enough to be really annoying, but not bad enough to get him permanently suspended from the family. That was the kind of person he is and the kind of friend he was. And he called me one morning in May and said, "I'm going to run for president." And I thought he was joking. I said, I'm going to marry Santa Claus and become Mrs. Claus. That is how unserious I thought he was. He said, "No, Marian, I'm running for president of Haiti, and I need you to manage my communications for my campaign." Ultimately, Time magazine commented that he had lit the light that plunged the world's attention back on Haiti, which will be critical to prompting the international donor community to deliver on the billions. But I want to give you the context. This was the first ever earned media pre-negotiated deal. Larry King Live wanted to handle the announcement that Wyclef, in fact, was going to file. And I needed a lot more coverage. So I needed Fortune, I needed AOL Black Planet, I needed People I needed a whole lot of things, and we bundled together a pre-negotiated deal in order for these guys to get this.
Tonight, Wyclef Jean, exclusive. The singer is running for president of Haiti, speaking for the first time on TV right here about why he's doing it, what his first act as his homeland's leader would be, and how he hopes to change the country for the better. And to our viewers here in the United States and around the world, thanks very much for joining us. I'm Wolf Blitzer sitting in for Larry tonight. Larry has the week off. Let's go right to Port-au-Prince. Wyclef Jean is joining us now. Wyclef, we had our Larry King Live cameras following you today. Tell us what you did. You formally filed papers. You want to be the next president of Haiti. Is that right? You want to be the president of Haiti, right?
Yes, it's my first time announcing it live that today I went in and I signed and I am running to be the president of Haiti.
The election is scheduled for the end of November, November 28th. You have a few months to campaign right now. You're 40 years old. Most of your life you've lived in the United States. You were born in Haiti. You feel strongly about Haiti. Why do you want to be president? Why have you made this decision?
Well, after January 12th, I would say over 50% of the population is a youth population, and we suffered for over 200 years. Now that our country has toppled, it's a chance to rebuild from the bottom on up. And I don't even say I'm trying to be president. I'm being drafted by the youth of Haiti. Right now is a chance for us to bring real education into the school, for infrastructure, for security, and proper jobs. So this is some of the reasons that I'm running.
What qualifies you to be president of Haiti?
Well, what qualifies me to be president of Haiti, when I look at the past 200 years with what our people have suffered, Wolf, political instability, coups after coup d'etats, I feel that me running, it brings a neutral situation, meaning that Wyclef Jean can sit with any political party, have a conversation. I'm coming in neutral. I think 200 years we have suffered the exact same thing, and what I'm saying is when you vote for Wyclef Jean, you basically try something new. I represent the voice of the youth, which is over 50% of the population.
I want you to stand by for a moment, Wyclef. We're only getting started. We have a lot of questions I want to go through. This is a momentous a moment for the people of Haiti right now. They're going to get a sense a little bit of what you're all about, why you want to be president of Haiti. We'll continue this conversation, Wyclef, right after this.
So I share that because it was a moment of creativity in my career that for me was probably actually bigger even than Metrosexual, because it was the negotiation of around the planet, free media, all synchronized to one evening at one place. I also will say I learned a lot from Wyclef. As you can see, he's not your standard Unilever, Procter, MasterCard or Visa, Apple or IBM kind of client. If there was an adventure, he would find his way into it. And for those of you who are involved in the music business, he's actually chairing the Cannes Music Jury this year, which I think is actually a great embrace on the part of the creative community of people who are truly creators. But what I learned from him was about positive thinking and optimism. Whatever you threw at him, whatever you throw at him today, he has a smile. He never wavered, even when it became completely clear that the corruption in Haiti was going to lead to his being disqualified. He kept going, but I also learned that simpler is often better. We spend so much time looking for big words and big strategies and big creative ideas, and it's kind of easier to go from point A to point B. And in Haiti, a place that was and is today entirely broken, it was all about messaging that would go from point A to point B. Just so you know, by the end of August, Wyclef was disqualified by Proval's government. They claimed he hadn't spent enough time living as a resident in Haiti in the previous 10 years, even though he'd been serving as their Haitian delegate to the UN. So it was an out of control. And another rapper, a rapper then known as Sweet Mickey, President Michael Martelly, was ultimately elected. And as you can see, Haiti's still pretty broken. The next movement I bring up is nothing to do with me other than my absolute obsession with what this young girl has done. Imagine if I was still in my role as a PR agency CEO and I'd gone to a client and I'd pitched Greta as a concept. I'd say we're going to put a 16-year-old kid outside the Swedish parliament with a badly hand-drawn placard to protest climate change, and the idea is she sits there. What do you think? Yet here we are, little more than 12 months later, and Greta has emerged as a latter-day figure, more like Joan of Arc than like any other teenage girl I could think of. This tiny young girl has sparked a massive global movement addressing the UN and compelling millions of people to take to the streets. There is this myth that successful campaigns require big budgets. When Ford Motor Company came to me in 2003 after Metrosexual, and they said, the former CEO of Ford Motor Company, Jack Nasser, who had just purchased Polaroid, said, I want a Metrosexual. He gave us a pretty large budget, a couple of $1 million, and we found Outkast, Andre and Big Boy. They were already singing a song for 6 months called Hey Ya, Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture. We went to them, and we said, what do you need to be more collaborative with us? And they're like, what took you so long to get here? And by the way, I hope none of you represent Cadillac, because in that same song, they sing about your daddy's caddy. And we had a couple of $1 million allocated for us to do all kinds of things. We never needed to spend it because we gave them for some money. And then the high point of that summer for me was when I had to issue a press release saying, please don't shake your pictures, because in fact, the composition gets screwed up if you shake a Polaroid picture too much. That's proof of when you enter culture. That's the kind of thing that you want to be part of, but it's a next generation style creativity. So what we need to sort of say too is some of the best campaigns are done on a shoestring. I judged a Cannes a couple of years ago, and one of the things then as an agency person was most of the best work appeared to be done either on a shoestring for not-for-profits, for real provocateurs, for people who were at hope's edge. So they couldn't say no to a big idea. It's almost like budget is the enemy of great creativity. So as marketers, as designers, as art directors, as PR people, when we look at the success of Greta, we actually have this choice. We can wonder if we become irrelevant, pushed aside by these agile startups or by data, or we can be inspired by how the smallest campaign can snowball into a global movement. I want to talk about another one that I have. Oh, this is cool. Oh, yeah, another one that I did not work on, but I've been watching and watching with real fear. 5 weeks, just 5 weeks after 14 students and 3 staff members were killed in the Parkland High School massacre in Florida, a handful of students organized a mass protest March for Our Lives that is now at the vanguard of gun control activism in the US. Within days, they'd raised more than $2 million, had a significant social media following. These run-of-the-mill high school juniors and seniors gave televised speeches and interviews as if it was something they'd been prepped for all their lives. At best, they were debate club members. Like Greta, the Parkland students woke the world to the potential of Generation Z. It's been called this change from slacktivism to activism, but these young people know how to harness the power of the digital world they grew up in, and they can really touch each one of us, and they can also teach all of us a thing or two about how to do things with kindness and humor. As David Hogg, one of the students who survived the shooting, said many times on Twitter, the young people will win. I, for one, sort of pray he's right. Now, let me take you, unfortunately, to another school shooting that I did work on. The Parkland mass murder was really all too familiar to Americans. For me, it was another reminder of the horrible day in 2012 when a single gunman killed 20 small children and 7 adults, if you choose to count his mother, at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. That level of evil was almost impossible to process when it happened. I was living in Connecticut. I was shaken. My husband practiced law and had been the former state attorney in that very community. But if a mass murder could take place in this sleepy, it's almost rural, to call it suburban is kind of a step up. In my own state, I felt that it could happen anywhere. And it became even more personal when a couple of hours into the news reports, I realized that the cousin of the assistant I shared with, Bob Jeffrey at JWT, his first cousin had been murdered. So it was a family we knew, and it made it that much more personal. I'm not sharing this to reopen wounds or as a political statement for better gun control in the US. I'm sharing it because of the good I've seen come from the tragedy. So many of these parents who lost their small children have turned anguish into something positive. I first met Alyssa Parker face-to-face, the mom of one of the murdered students, a few days after the shooting. In part, it was because we were asked to help because the family had been overwhelmed by news media clamoring for interviews, by people wanting to help, and by hateful conspiracy theorists. The worst thing that happened after the shooting are the people who've come forward to say it didn't happen, and you can find them all over the internet. If there is a hell, I nominate members of the hateful conspiracy theorists to go to hell. That's the only place they belong. Alyssa Parker, who lost her daughter Emily and her husband Robbie, they were at that point in their late 20s, soon recognized that they wanted something meaningful to come out of this tragedy. They wanted to honor their daughter's Emily love of art, and with our help, we launched the Emily Parker Art Connection, dedicated to building programs for children. But more importantly, we also helped them to launch Safe and Sound, a school initiative. And probably the most significant thing I've ever done in my career was the Parkers decided that they could start healing if they could understand what motivated Adam Lanza to go to that school and kill. And through the PR agency of GE, the shooter's father was a senior executive at GE. I don't know how many people realize that. We reached out, and I made the request that Peter Lanza, Adam Lanza's dad, meet with parents who wanted to talk to him. I got an email back from Peter within 12 hours. It was forwarded by his PR saying, Marian, I will meet with them anywhere, anytime, and if I could trade places with any of them, that would be my wish. That healing moment when they actually sat down face to face and he gave them a couple of hours and then really unlimited access in the after weeks to ask questions, it really changed everything. Now, to me, that was the ultimate form of creativity. We actually figured out a way to begin to have a community start to heal. It also proves that, as the Parkers did with Grace, really reaching out the first olive branch to the Lanzas, that love can actually win. there's another campaign that you guys may be familiar with that I've worked on, will always be close to my heart. As we all know, the holiday season, Christmas in particular, has become highly commercialized, and I won't pretend that I don't shop a lot for Christmas, even the day after Thanksgiving. I don't feel guilty when I buy stuff because buying stuff keeps our commercial economy going. But in 2012, it had finally become too much for many people. And the spectacle of the gluttony that starts on Thanksgiving when Americans overeat and then goes into Black Fridays when Americans overshop had gotten out of control. The campaign we worked on, Givingtuesday, was meant to be an antidote. Why not set aside one day during the holiday shopping season to support worthy causes? Why not spend one day thinking about others rather than the low prices that will come with a 50-inch TV set? Our first campaign was a hit, and each year more and more companies, more and more charities, more and more everything participate. Last year, 150 people did Givingtuesday, raising more than $300 million for worthy causes in tiny micro donations. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a really interesting and affordable campaign that virtually any client can jump onto and make a difference with absolutely immediately. I personally had a passion project related to Indigenous people. We didn't start till very late, pretty much the equivalent of when it would be now until then. And we were still able to raise over a couple of $100,000 through, again, micro donations and matching. So if you're not familiar with Givingtuesday, I'd urge you to do it. But Givingtuesday is a success thanks to social media, viral marketing, and a catchy hashtag. But there's really a lot more at play. Doing good feels good, better than any endorphin rush from buying the latest pair of Nalos. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, have shown that giving to charity triggers the same responses in the brain as sex and good food. And there's huge potential for incorporating this into our best work, just giving people the pleasure of giving. I would put authenticity right underneath that, but the giving, the act of handing something you care about or that matters or that will matter to another person, to that person. So if you're seeking inspiration, take a look at the kind of creative work you see from not-for-profits, from small agencies. Some of the best work that comes from startups with all the tools that are available to me. We know we can make a difference, but we also know we all need to be disruptive. And this brings me to my new focus. When the headhunter first called me in summer of 2017 and started describing this job to me, I said there's only two possibilities. Either you're talking about Unilever, and I don't think so, or you're talking about a tobacco company, and I am a never smoker. A never smoker. I'm not even a former smoker or a maybe smoker. I have only ever consumed 2 cigarettes in my entire life, and it was to get kicked out of religious school so I could continue to play sports when I was a teenager. I kept saying no. I kept saying no, and then I started looking at their website and seeing the fact that maybe the best way to get people to stop smoking would be to actually use tobacco money to do it in different ways. And I kept, and look, my dad died of lung cancer. He's a long-time smoker, and I'm a 2-time brain tumor survivor. So I'm not somebody you would ever imagine. And I kind of laughed in their face for the first 3 months, and for the next 3 months talked to them and were like, you're really nice and interesting people. It surprises me that this is what tobacco people are like, but absolutely not. And yet, at some point, I had this epiphany that with a really large budget, maybe we could make a difference to get people to embrace smoke-free. What PMI asked me to do was achieve their vision of a smoke-free future, a future in which adults who would otherwise have continued to smoke replace cigarettes with better smoke-free alternatives. And that's an important distinction because a lot of the toxic impact of cigarettes is tied to the smoke, is tied to burning, rather than to tobacco or nicotine. Ultimately, I have come to see this as an opportunity to do something positive for global health and for those men and women who smoke. I realized I can play a part in reducing the world's population of combustible smokers, now estimated at $1.1 billion. But man, it was the longest negotiation. And then I would say, for the next 90 days, when I was still working at Havas, I kept asking myself, did I do the right thing? Was I going to somehow be co-opted? And I can tell you, after almost 20 months on the job, I know as little about how to market Marlboro now as I did the day I came in. Earlier this year, we launched our Unsmoke campaign. I say launched because really what it was coming up with a creative expression to capture an effort that was already underway before I got here. You could actually wonder why I didn't just join an anti-tobacco group, because I didn't want to just talk ultimately about what a better future could look like for adult smokers. I wanted to help to create that future. There are many groups working to convince smokers to quit cigarettes, and look, tax dollars from cigarette sales play a role in that also, and they have success. But the WHO tells us that there'll still be as many smokers in 2025 as there are today. Most of us agree that people would be better off giving up tobacco and nicotine altogether, and they'd also be better off giving up double bacon cheeseburgers, dirty martinis, late-night movie marathons. But we're operating in the real world, a world in which in any given year, 9 out of 10 adult smokers who think about quitting don't. I believe that those 9 deserve the opportunity to switch to scientifically substantiated smoke-free alternatives, and it's really my job to start that conversation. We're making progress. Some 8 million adult smokers have switched to our smoke-free products. Our product is a heat not burn, not an EE vapor product at this point, leaving cigarettes behind. And in this context, that seems like a drop in the bucket, but it's pretty meaningful to those 8 million people and to all those who care about their health. So back to our campaign and to creativity. We had our label, Unsmoke. And by the way, we met with most of the holding company groups, and different people gave us ideas. And because I was intensely neurotic, I over-tested them. I allowed my own opinions to creep in, and I was the worst client in history. It took me 6 months to decide which campaign to go with, and we kept paying people to keep a campaign sort of alive and kept testing. And then this label, this one word, kept popping out in research. And let me talk to you about the unmovement. The unmovement, the desire to un-something in your life is really popular. We're looking to unclutter our homes. We're looking to unfriend toxic ex-friends, ex-partners, or to people who bring us down. The uncluttering spirit can be seen in one of my favorite reality series, Tiny House and Tiny House Movements, and in the Marie Kondo effect, which encourages us to get rid of objects that no longer spark joy. We all want to unplug from the world by disconnecting and switching off our phones. So what better way for a smoker to unclutter his or her life than by unsmoking? And then what better way to kick off our campaign than fighting our battle to get it included in Urban Dictionary? Some of these things are so simple and so not creative, as I grew up at Shy at Day thinking about creative, and yet end up being the foundation of a fabulous campaign. The next thing we did was figure out what is our message. So we distilled it down to its very core. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit. If you don't quit, change. And it's in that order. And we are only speaking to adult smokers with this, but we wanted to peel away the padding and reveal and amplify the essence. The Unsmoke Your World campaign was launched by us as a way to unite adult smokers and non-smokers and to encourage them to get involved and share their stories. It challenges adults who would otherwise continue smoking to seek information and to make better choices. And we try to ensure that it does not encourage non-smokers, the young, or those trying to give up cigarettes and nicotine completely to take up our products. Creatively, a campaign like this is really fraught with challenge. Everything, and I mean everything, has to be carefully checked before publishing. Being inaccurate or even making a factually correct claim that's not permitted in a particular market isn't an option for my company. For me, this was a whole new world. Creative freedom is also limited for our designers and copywriters, campaigns compared to campaigns that don't have to navigate a maze of rules. So many of you have the luxury of working in things that isn't government regulated, but just as every designer has to work within the corporate identity guidelines of their clients, so too do we have to stay within the framework of how we can communicate. Despite these restrictions, we've actually been overwhelmed by how many people have told us that our campaign resonates with them. Many have taken to social media to share their stories about how we've unsmoked their lives or that of a friend or a loved one. We've also seen unsmoked runners take on charity runs and PMI employees take to the streets to clean up cigarette butts and these happen in different countries at different times. The micro website we've set up for the campaign features compelling stories of people who've taken up the challenge. I use every one of these authentic stories, these real stories, as a way for me to keep going. Sometimes with all the haters out there, it is really hard to get up in the morning and go to work. The question is not if you're going to deal with hate, it's how much hate are you going to deal with. So look, I began by referencing the success of some of the incredible global movements, individuals activating for change. When we look at climate change, when we look at the state of global politics, the work still has to be done on inclusion and diversity, on pay equity, and it's easy to be disheartened by the challenges society faces. So what can we do? It's an all too common refrain, and it turns out we can do a lot. My campaign is on smoke, and I encourage you to find yours. Thank you.